with their activities, with immigration breaches that we've reported in the past, basically proved, that they are colluding, and here we go again. I just don't like saying this sort of stuff. They're flagrantly breaching all the laws in the country,
So if you looked at everything from parking laws to immigration laws, taxation laws,
fair trading,
industrial regulations.
In every area there's big problems. With Transport Department, from the New South Wales Government Task Force, we were told that this department cannot deal with illegal operators in this city because they don't have the numbers in their departments being cut dramatically, and especially they don't have the language skills to get evidence from the customers that they need to be able to prosecute. We've put forward dozens of different breaches that we found out on the road, the drivers, and in one particular instance we had a backup of a security guard as evidence, got information from a guy, didn't know what a driver's authority was to even drive the vehicle in this state, and working for a Korean operator.
What nationality were these drivers?
Korean. Again, they're using their own people. This chap was happy enough to say he had an ITAWA guide badge on, but he didn't have the vehicle he was using was a hired vehicle, and he didn't have a proper driver's authority that you need to carry tourists in this country.
So a lot of the drivers and guides that these companies are employing aren't properly qualified.
Oh, definitely. The biggest problem that we put forward to the New South Government Task Force, which Bob Carr initiated 3 years ago, when he said he would take swift and decisive action on these issues if they were proven. Well, the major point was that the driver guides are actually getting their licence within a week here, passing the 1A driving test, and then they would go across the road through to the RTA and get a driver's authority within a week. And their only experience needed was 1 year's experience in Japan, and no police check, as we have here in Australia. The information's not made available to the government, so they could possibly, a scenario could be that a little girl coming over here to work has held a licence for as little as 1 year in Japan, and possibly, because they don't drive that often there, may have only driven 4 or 5 times in a life.
It could be driving a bus.
Up to 30-seater bus around, carrying 29 lives around here in Australia.
What would happen if you or I tried to get a licence that quickly, that easily?
Well, you can't. The minimum in New South Wales at the moment is 2 years, but the government is taking action to change that, hopefully. It is one of the recommendations that we have a reciprocal transport licensing laws throughout the country, and that's one thing that needs to be addressed urgently, because the other states don't have similar driver authorities, and they're actually, we believe, they're bringing in drivers through these other states, holding them there, and then after a 2-year period they're allowed to come into New South Wales.
So they're breaking all the rules?
They're breaking all the rules. A lot of them, I've heard of numbers with some of the Korean operators where out of about 75 inbound operators, about 13 of them were accredited. But this whole business goes into many different areas, as you said. Even in the shopping, in the souvenir shops, we're looking at wages maybe half of the award wages. There's massive under-award wages. Again, I'm starting to get nervous.
Right. It's okay.
It's all right. I'm just talking too much.
Have a go. Just slow
down,
have another
Ted. Smoke. Yeah, that's what I'm doing. I'm not breathing.
Just slow down. Remember to breathe, mate. Very important.
I'm trying to think.
You were talking about the wage rates in souvenir shops and places like that.
Yes, there has been fairly strong evidence of under-award wage payments within the industry and within ancillary industries, including souvenir shops around the place. They're probably under Nico Darling Harbour Hotel. I believe that all the shops under there staffed pretty well all by visa holders, mainly from Japan, and it's pretty well-known fact that they're being paid about half the award rate.
So our immigration laws and our visa process is being rorted as well?
Most definitely. I was told by guides 3 years ago when we initiated the New South Wales Task Force that possibly as many as 80 to 100% of the guides were breaching their visa requirements.
And the federal government knows about this?
The federal government's known about it for 3 years, but Mr Ruddock is the only minister out of the 13 ministers that I've met face to face Mr Ruddock has been the only minister who's taken direct action, and during the first meeting it was standard union officials that I'd invited that Mr Ruddock had taken action at that meeting and told his Chief of Staff to initiate an amendment to the Immigration Act which would give his investigators more power to look into these breaches.
But that hasn't happened, though, has it?
It hasn't happened as yet. I've been told on several occasions that it'll be going through the next session of Parliament. I spoke to Mr Ruddock personally recently where he promised me personally that it would go through. May not go through in the same form, but he has initiated the Illegal Workers Review, which they're currently investigating, and this would be all part of that.
But I mean, we shouldn't be too positive about government, and we should, when I say government, I'm talking about whether it was a Labor government or a Liberal National Party government, doesn't make any difference. If you were to describe the performance of the Australian government in protecting an Australian industry in the last decade, how would you describe it?
I think there'd be only one word to describe it as possibly pathetic. The interest of the Australian workers now, the battlers, is in a situation I mentioned during a meeting with the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff, that the citizens in this country who are union members appear to be ostracised by their own government now. During Parliament we hear the government religiously denouncing unions and as some sort of fraternity that's out to destroy the country. But the unions in this country, all they're basically doing, a lot of them, is to try and keep the workers' dignity, so that rather than begging, we will still have a power to be able to bargain.
Who actually runs the Australian inbound Asian tourist industry?
Well, I'd say it's pretty well, I would believe now that it's possibly somewhere about 90% controlled from outside this country.
That over the years that you and others have told the government about all these things.
Well, the first was the New South Wales Government Task Force, which was initiated. The same problems we put to that task force are the same problems we put to the Queensland Government, and they then initiated their task force, which has been much more successful.
But nothing's really changed, has it?
Nothing's changed as yet. The government will say that they are going to put initiatives into place, but the problem that I see with it now is there is no industry knowledge being used.
But I mean, you think the solutions are easy, that just do what other countries do, that you have to accredit these people, you crack down on the black money, you make codes of conduct. I mean, it's not rocket science. So why haven't they done anything about it?
Because this is one of the follow-ups to deregulation. I think it's pretty well known with the banking industry how it's destroyed the service, and it's the same thing that's happened now in our industry.
But I mean, we've virtually given our industry over to other people offshore.
That's it, and if it can happen with the tourism industry, who's next? The opposition actually said that they had tried to put an issue forward over 50 Korean welders in Western Australia, and they had no success with it. But then how can they compare that with a quarter of the largest industry in the country?
So this industry that supposedly benefits us, and most Australians out there would believe what they're told it does, it benefits us.
There's no benefit. There's no benefit. Where there was training of Australians to fill positions as guides in this country, most of the operators had a policy of employing Australians and training them. Now I believe out of around 800 tour guides working in the Japanese industry with Australian drivers still working on coaches, I believe there's only 2 left out of 800. So last 2 turn the lights out, and that's it. And then there'll be nobody left to complain.
Good, man. It's personally cost you a lot, hasn't it?
It's cost me 4 years of my life. I probably lost 25 kilos in weight over that time through stress associated with this issue. We started off saying these practices are unscrupulous, but I think now it's pretty well could be classed as corrupt. So working on this project has been a self-funded campaign. I've battled now for several years just to try and keep my home, and the amenities and everything else look like being cut off in the near future, unless I can't do a little bit better than I'm doing now to support the campaign.
And you've upset a few people with your campaign too.
I've upset a few people, but one thing that's happened with those people, no one has ever denied one word that I've said as not being the truth.
You were even assaulted, I believe.
No.
You can't talk about that at all?
No, not at all, mate.
All right, okay. Finished. We're done. I mean, oh yeah, I don't just watch
Ministry and the inbound operators get the language skills. I want to go into the schools as part of this project and tell our kids they've got a bloody future. Because the youth suicide rate in this country is one of the worst in the world, and this is a good time. I told Sinodinos the other day, this is... these are just a few photos of when I was actually working as a tour coach operator, as I did for 12 years. I used to love my job, I love my tourists, passengers, and that's the reason I took this issue up. Not because I'm a masochist, but because I'm a Christian, basically. And people we used to have great tours with would have our photos taken with the tourists. I used to say this is 5,250,973 for the year, but now just doesn't happen anymore. The people are pushed in and out of shops at such a great rate. They don't have they don't ever speak to an Australian citizen in this country anymore. I'll start again? Yep. Okay, these are just a few of the photos that I've collected over the time, especially I have dozens with my passengers. These people here, just a group of young ladies out here for a holiday in the country. They had a great time. We had a good tour. But this sort of thing unfortunately doesn't happen too much anymore. It's a bit of a before and after. This is a photo of me just before I took up this campaign.
Mate, you even look chubby there.
Yeah, I probably, as I said, about 23 kilos down on that now. I wish I was back. So unfortunately none of the clothes fit anymore. And I was quite proud of my job as a coach driver. We're basically the front line for the tourism industry. And unfortunately now we're losing all the good drivers as well.
Is this a moustache I see, mate?
No.
Where was this taken?
That was taken out at Mrs Macquarie's Point, which is we rarely go to anymore, but that was one of probably the prettiest sightseeing point in all of Sydney, with the Opera House in the foreground and the Harbour Bridge in the background, and the beautiful big Moreton Bay fig trees around there.
So you were proud of this land, eh?
I'm very proud of Australia, and I would love to see this industry turn around and get back into good quality industry, and then we'll get some return business, which we basically get hardly any at the moment.
4%.
Yeah, well, I've heard it's even less than that, where Hawaii gets about 46% return business. I've got the hands shaking, that's the trouble. Mate, do you want to hold it?
No.
Yeah. Yes, this is